Did she leave? Oh. Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar on how to finance your ideas and deal with failures. Firstly, thank you for taking time out and being with us today. I'm Nikita, an alumni from the ME3 and PM3E program, hosting this webinar as part of Emanate, a community which was established by ME3 and PM3E graduates with a focus on sharing knowledge through webinars on sustainability and renewable energy related topics. In today's webinar, we focus on how to start your own company. Throughout the master course and over the years working in this sector, I've come across so many brilliant ideas from colleagues, from classmates, which remained as ideas. We didn't convert them into businesses. On today's webinar, we have with us two of our alumni, Claudia and Eric, who did take that courageous step to launch their own companies and have continued their entrepreneurial journey ever since. The webinar is divided into three sections. So we first start with Claudia and Eric presenting about their suggestions on how to finance our ideas and find financing for the side projects that we generally have. Then they have a panel discussion with each other on how to deal with failures, followed by a final section of live Q&A with the speakers. During the whole webinar, please use the comment section in YouTube to post any of your questions that you have. Also, before I introduce our first speaker, I would like to invite you all to share why you didn't end up converting the brilliant idea that you had, or an idea which you really believed in, into a business case. What were the challenges and hurdles that you came across in this process? We would be really interested in discussing these at the end of the webinar. So our first speaker today is Claudia. She is the founder of Badgerly, a consulting service which supports SMEs in finding government grants and subsidies. It's actually the fourth company that she's founded, so definitely the right person to tell us how to find financing and how to really go ahead with setting up a company. Over to you, Claudia, to tell us a few words about yourself and go ahead with your presentation.
Yes, thank you, Nikita, and hello, everyone. So, yes, indeed, I've started 4 organizations. On the next slide, you can see the list of some of them. The first one is when I came back from ME3, I took a job as a solar engineer, and the job itself was not fulfilling enough. So I started a side project about giving cooking lessons from immigrant women. I live in Montreal. I'm based in Montreal, and we have a big community of immigrants from a variety of places, and there's many problems around it, but through cooking I found a good way of sharing and exchanging, and I love cooking. So this company is closed now. I also founded Exventus, the company that was trying to recycle wind turbine blades, and eventually mostly dealing with waste from the composite industry. And then this company was closed as well. I worked more. I went back to work. I co-founded Women in Tech Manifesto, which is a not-for-profit promoting women in the tech industry here in Montreal, or in the province of Quebec, and a little bit in Canada. This is still going, but I've left a little bit my implication in the project. And lastly, my current company, which is a consulting. Through all of this, Exventus, for example, I managed to do $13,000 of sales and managed to find $125,000 of free money. So I found myself a added value in understanding and finding free money. So today I'm going to try and tell you a little bit about how to do this, and when is it worth it, and when is it not worth it. So on the next slide, you can find how does it work? How does free money work? Typically, subsidies and grants, and there's a little bit of contests out there which will fund very small amounts of money, but if you want to have a lot of money in terms of grants and subsidies, you need to spend $1 to, oh, this is Canadian dollars, by the way, because this is a Canadian presentation. So you need to, you spend $1 and then the government or some entity gives you $1 to match your own dollar. So it's price matching. The percentage changes, but you always have to spend to get money. So, and yet when you don't have money, this is difficult, because if for Exventus, for example, I had no money at all, I had my $13,000 of sales, but I had to use it for some expenses. But these expenses became a project, and within the project, this money that I had from a client from a different contest, I was able to match it to get more money. Yes. So on the next slide, so whenever you have when you don't have money, all the money that you have can be used as a lever. Your sales, donations, investment, private equity. If someone gives you, if an investor or a donator gives you $250,000, then you could equally look for that amount, and up to, generally in the world, you can find up to 80% of the value of the expenses in grants and subsidies. So you can use it to reduce. If you have money, you can reduce your expenses, and if you don't have money, you can increase your expenses. So this is, for example, you don't have money, you go seek a potential client who commits to give you money if you bring a project to life. Then this potential money can be used to raise a subsidy. And when you have the subsidy, it's easier to convince everyone else, angel investors, even the clients themselves. If you say, I got this money to support the project, now give me your money, then it will be very easy. That's what I did with Exventus. I first went for a little bit of consulting sales, then a contest. Then I was able to build a $100,000 project with the commitment of a client that said, yes, I'll pay you this much money. Okay, so if we go to the next slide, where can you find this type of money? So there's different types of expenses that you can fund that typically are allowed to be expensed in subsidies and grants. Contests cover everything, but contests typically don't go over $50,000 at most of what I've seen here, at least. So operational is just regular operations, HR, legal, some types of investors. And then you can see it, on this slide, the training, exportation. And then innovation is something else, developing new things. This is something that you can fund, either the material, the wages, the marketing around it, sometimes pilot tests. And then you can also fund a client, which is what I mentioned before, which is essential when starting a business and having no money, because finding a client on top of giving you money, it's going to give you a lot of credibility. And there's different ways of subsidies work. I call them retroactive and proactive. Retroactive is that you spend your money, you do your taxes, and then you get the money. And proactive is you submit a proposal, they give you money ahead of the project, and then they give you money when the project ends. It's important, these two things, because it affects a lot your cash flow. So when it's retroactive, you need to, even if you get the subsidy or the grant or the approval, you need to spend all the money, wait a year, and then get it back. So you need to, on top of subsidies, you need financing. Yes. So we'll go through this very quick, and I believe we'll share the slides. But it's just I made a few equations where you can validate if the free money is worth it. It's worth the investment of time. This is a local guy who said I should have. He did a successful company, a successful exit in medtech, and he said I should have. At a fail camp, he said I should have run after clients instead of running after contests. because in fact he lost the time, and it's very valuable time. The time of finding a client has a value. You can go to the next slide. So when you invest time in writing a proposal, you have all the values here for your economic equation are there. How much sales are you planning to make? How many hours do you work? What's your wage? How much time it's going to take you to write the proposal? The probability of winning. And I wrote completeness of a business plan. If you don't have a business plan, then your money has a much higher, your investment of time has a higher value than if you don't, because writing a proposal for a contest or a subsidy is going to build your business plan for you. So whether you do it for a contest or not for a contest, the time is the same. So your value of it is there. And in here, there's something that I'm going to bring later, which is hourly salary of $0, and it gives you it makes you think that your investment is very low for writing things when you put in there that your time is worth $0. So we can go to the next slide. So this is just a small algorithm. If you have money, no. Can a client give me some money? No. Then consider applying to contests. Contests are going to give you free money in small amounts that you can use as a first lever to do bigger things. But as the guy said in the earlier slide, contests are not necessarily great. So if a client can give you some money, no, consider applying to subsidies and grants. So if we go to the next slide. Yeah, so the money that you can find is a client can give me that much money, I have that much money, then typically you just double it, and that's the amount of expenses you can get. So never just consider your own money, always consider everyone else's money. If we go to the next slide. And yes, should I apply to a subsidy? So even a subsidy, it has the same economics than the contest. If, for example, if there's a concept that I didn't talk about, but it's the value of a subsidy in the future. If you have investors, the value of the money of the subsidy now in the future for when you do your exit, it's great. For example, a 50,000 subsidy for Airbnb in 7 years before their exit would have been worth $450 million when they did an exit. So there's a high value if you're the owner of a company that has angel investors to apply for subsidies, because all that money will be exponentially years later. Okay, if we go, I think I'll wrap it up because I'm extending my time. You can find money everywhere in government, municipal, here we call it provincial, but state, all levels of government, and all the ecosystem of entrepreneurship in a city. It's all of them who give this money, always, plus private companies. Go to the next slide. And I generate, when I identify all these companies, I generate a RSS feed that give me all their local news. So I know when a new subsidies come. If a subsidy is over, but I know an entity is giving some, I create an RSS feed and I know daily who's giving money. If we go to the next slide. Yes, so I think I'll stop here because I'm done with my time. Mostly in the how to build a project. The idea is the idea. Well, if we can run quickly through all the slides and get to the end. Yes. So yes, yeah. Continue. We can continue with the slides. So yes, and how to build a project. I'll give you 3 tips to build it. It's read the proposal and make sure you rigorously give them what they want. And this seems like a silly tip, but it's it's the one thing that most people don't do right. For having read many proposals of clients who read, they reply what they want, and they don't reply what the people ask giving the subsidy want. Then finding credibility around partners, clients. As a person who starts a project, your people don't know you. So if you partner with someone big, then you'll get all the credibility. And then never forgetting that it's people behind us, even if it's typically very bureaucratic. The people behind us can bring you a lot of help in getting these things. Just talking to them, asking them questions. So yes, this is a small overview of how the subsidies work and how to it's important to plan them. It's important to ask for help. And if you apply to some, I strongly suggest to keep your KPIs of success and metrics of even of your budgets in there to see how everything progresses in your in the timeline of your company. So this will end my section.
Thank you so much, Claudia. That was really helpful. And thank you also for sticking to the time. We really found the tools that you've shared very useful. And I think we will come back to them in the Q&A session also. Just to remind the audience, please use the live comment section to tell us where you're watching us from, and also to talk about what were the challenges that you faced while planning to set up your company, or what has stopped you from doing that. Next up, we have a classmate from Claudia, Eric, who was part of the ME3 course too, and was working in a big technical consultancy before co-founding Enjava in 2016. And he's supporting companies and organizations in cutting their greenhouse gas emissions through Enjava. So now over to you, Eric.
Perfect. Thanks very much, Nikita. And Claudia, what a wonderful way to kickstart this webinar. I wish that kind of presentation and those algorithms would have been available for us when we tried to put this together a few years ago. So I think that's going to be helpful for others leading the way into entrepreneurship. Money is an important part of that. What I'm going to do is to give you a very short intro on how we co-founded Enjava, another partner, and myself in 2016. So with that, I'm going to share a screen. Let's see how that looks. That should be a shared screen. Nikita, does that look okay for everybody, you think? Yeah. That looks wonderful. So this is Enjava. And I think most of the people on this webinar are going to share an academic background, which makes me go through this slide relatively quickly. I think our education made it pretty clear that the way we use energy leads down to some CO2 emissions that ultimately is going to drive us towards global warming, and which might make it reasonably uncomfortable for quite a few people. With this as an academic background, this also matched what my co-founder Valentin and I experienced in real life. I've spent a significant amount of time in my life in Svalbard, which is a collection of islands north of Norway, where they very much feel the impacts of climate change already and at an accelerating rate. Valentin is French, and he comes from Normandy, and he was able to see the increasing severity and frequency of flooding in his home region. So with that, both as an academic driver and a little bit of a practical background, we ended up both working for a consultancy coming out of school called DNV, and then later being renamed to DNVGL. And DNVGL is a technical consultancy. They're global. They have about 400 offices, I think, in 100 countries. And they are driven by a purpose of safeguarding life, property, and the environment. Not a bad place to start off your career after school. So we had a lot of fun in that company, and ultimately Valentin and I ended up working together in oil and gas, but trying to help our clients reduce their emissions and implementing standards of energy management on board their operations. In 2016, we thought this was fun, and we also thought that maybe there's a way that we could do this for ourselves. There was also a significant downturn in oil and gas, and some of the competence was leaving the DNVGL, so we said maybe this is the time to do something silly. So we got together and started planning in the spring of 2016, and needed both a little bit of an idea, but also the practicalities around it. I have a very short presentation today, so I'm not going to go into all of the details. Maybe some of it will come more out in the discussion a little bit later. But I think some of the key takeaways from this this area of uncertainty where you have an idea and you want to try to get to a decision gate on should I do this or should I not do this, I think there were three things that helped us. It helped us being two, so that we can bounce ideas with somebody who was equally committed as ourselves. It helped having frequent meetings, so we could plan some stuff, do some stuff on our own, but also get together and discuss it over time. And I think it helped us that we both had that consulting skill set, which ultimately is about understanding what are the most important things to get done and then getting them done. So those three were instrumental for us to get this up and running. Now, helping others reduce greenhouse gas emissions, that was one of the ideas that we played with, and ultimately the one we ended up with. But we also considered lots of other funky ideas. This one is actually inspired by what Claudia was doing in Canada, trying to understand how you could recycle composites and glass fibers from industry in a better way. So we almost started a company called Bukalao, but we didn't end up going that route. But I think that's an important part of the idea conception phase, to go broadly out and trying to figure out what resonates the most. What we did end up doing was starting a company called Endrava. And Endrava is a consultancy that takes a fact-based and analytical approach to helping others reduce their greenhouse gas emissions. In a nutshell, Valentin and I, we wanted Endrava to be a platform to take on cool projects. And so far, so good. The three circles there, we don't use them in the logo, but they were instrumental in making the logo. And what we've done is outline the overlaps between social, economic, and environmental sustainability. And in the founding papers of Endrava, in our company registration, it says that Endrava will support others with improving their triple bottom line, so trying to help them become sustainable along all those three axes. I could talk lots about getting our first clients and the excitement of that and getting projects and what's going wrong, but I think we'll also cover more of that in the discussion. But I wanted to quickly take you through the three things that makes Endrava tick as a company. The first one, that's the heart. I think there's a passion for the sustainability area that we've chosen, reducing greenhouse gas emissions, and I think that drives the company. There's something about a growing network, not only of clients who talk to each other about us, but also come back to us for more work, but also a growing network of partners that we take projects on together. That's fun. It's cool to deliver projects together. And the third one is really being so small and being unknown. It means that we have to compete with bigger, more established brand names for consultancy. And that means that typically our deliverables don't need to be good. They need to be much better than what everybody else is delivering. So that focus on quality is important to us. This is the team so far. Valentin and I are there, as well as Rebecca and Sigrid, our two first employees. So we started with 2, and now we're 4. We're hoping to take on another one right after summer. Valentin and I like to do new things. So when we started the company, we say, first goal, let's make it steady and operational. Let's make sure we have a good, safe cash flow that we're happy about. So when we did that, after a while, we said, okay, what's the next stupid thing that we could do? Well, next stupid thing is to try to grow the thing. So now we're on the growth strategy that's going to take us through 50% growth leading up to 2025. And by then we hope to be somewhere between 20 and 30 people. Not so much growth for its own sake, but growth because more people typically means more impact. And there seems to be quite a few things left to be done when it comes to greenhouse gas emissions. So some thoughts on money leading into our discussion with Claudia. When we started Endrava, we started out having a buffer in the bank, our own bank accounts, and we had defined an absolute criteria for when to exit. So we basically said we're going to survive 1 year with Endrava without having any projects. That's the size of the buffer we had in the bank. That made us sleep well in that first year, and it made us also comfortable leaving a big, cushy corporate job for jumping into something that was relatively uncertain. We got super lucky and had a big break. So ultimately, the first day after leaving ship, we ended up getting a project with the city of Oslo. But sometimes you're not that lucky. So having that buffer in the bank makes you feel more comfortable about taking that risk. The second one is using what you know to finance new ideas. We have started Endrava as a consultancy, but I think our long-term vision is to use the consultancy revenue to finance ideas and projects that we'd like to take on for new products, new services. We just started developing a tool for figuring out where CO2 can be found in Europe. And we think that our consultancy will be able to drive development of more such tools in the future. So then consultancy income, because that's what we know how to do, that's what clients are willing to pay us for, can then be used to finance your ideas going forwards. And the third one is taking a long-term perspective. Even though we had a project from day one, we've also been very conservative with what kind of salaries we like to take out and the money that we like to leave in the company. And I think that's important, not only for growing a company, because it means we're not dependent on loans. We don't have any loans. We don't have any external investors. It's only the money of Valentine and me who are in the company. And it makes us also more robust when it comes to downturns. So we're going through a Corona crisis right now, and that makes us feel relatively lucky and safe having about 120,000 euros of cash in our bank account should there be trickier times coming up ahead. So taking that long-term perspective and not taking out all the cash right away and buying fancy toys, I think is an important lesson learned. I think that was it for the brief and quick introduction, Nikita. I will stop sharing my screen now. Here we go. Voila.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. I think some of the things that you mentioned were really aligned very well with the startup that I work at too. So considering the Corona crisis, also being prepared for this and having this buffer is really playing an important role in how things function and ensuring long-term sustainability. But thank you for that. And we now go to the next section, which is on failures. So really discussing on failures, which is probably the most integral part of setting up a company, something that comes with it. And we will now have a discussion with Eric and Claudia, some of their biggest failure stories and asking each other questions on it. So we'll use the next 15 minutes to do that and then have the Q&A session. So Claudia, do you want to go first?
Yes. So now I'll share a few stories about of failures that got me to think differently in the company. And so the first one is I mentioned earlier the salary of the $0 or euro wage, this was something that in my early days I was trying to reduce the cost of all my projects to the minimum to try, and I thought that by having a very small project or not very I saw numbers as very impressive from my perspective of a person towards the perspective of a company. So I was thinking that by lowering to the max what I was requesting to clients and to not investors like angel investors, but investors in the project, let's say, that I would have more credibility. But in the end, it turned out to have a double negative impact because my wage. Well, first of all, people from an exterior point of view would see, why is she doing this for free? There was a lack of credibility in a project where I didn't invest in myself as well. And the second problem is this is not sustainable on the individual scale. Eric is very Eric and I know each other from the class, and we're also friends. So we can see that Eric is very organized in his financial plannings, and that he had money on the side, and then still to this day has money on the side, and has a growth that is grassroots. You know, there's no external investing. So I'm quite the opposite. And quickly I came to the realization that not having any wage was not sustainable, because I could not survive on the very long term. So now what I do now is that even sometimes I'm not giving myself money in the transaction, but on the paper I write a transaction, and this has a value in the project, and or I count my time. My time has a value now all the time, and sometimes I get paid 6 months later. Sometimes I'm paid 6 months ahead, but my money has a value all the time, and a fair value compared to the market.
How has been the reaction from your external investors when you start putting a time value on that, or money on the time that you're putting in? So, have they reacted positively, or have they started asking questions? Do they think you're expensive?
So yeah, I don't have any. I didn't have private investors in any of my companies, but I do when I present a project. to someone who wants to finance a project, people
Yeah.
see the value. And even in my consulting, I price my my hourly rate differently, and it's not because I price my hourly rate lower then people give me more contracts. In fact, sometimes I price my hourly rate twice as much as my regular one, which is defined for living purposes and paying for my necessities. And sometimes I charge twice as much, and people are happier to give me the contract. They see in it they sense in this wage credibility.
Yeah.
So yes.
I think that makes a lot of sense. I think it's nobody could expect you to take on a business and go full force at it without also being able to survive on the side. And I think
yes,
we're getting to the point in our lives where mid-30s, yeah, that means sooner or later we're going to start having families and mortgages. And just being an entrepreneur doesn't mean that you have to sacrifice the development of the rest of your life. Some people bootstrap it and sell everything and live in a little caravan in the countryside, and that's one way to do it. I admire that. But I want people also to know that you don't have to go that route in order to get your ideas up and running.
Exactly. And most people, so this is the realization that I came to, is that most people who give money are also happy to give you money to manage the project. Because people who give you money to create projects, they don't want to do the projects themselves. They want to give you money. They want to give money so the project happens. And they understand that someone has to take this project on. And now, so this is an internal thing that you have to come to terms with, the value that you create yourself.
So now you're taking out a salary?
Oh yeah, for sure.
I'm
paying my house.
First thing for us to learn is to pay ourselves when we start a company then.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So Eric, Mia, I'm curious to hear about your failures.
Oh, man. Well, I was trying to put a spin on this earlier today when I was thinking more about the failures that we've gone through as a company. And, truthfully, quite honestly, Endrava has been very much a story of incredible luck with timing and with the people that we ran into and the types of projects that we fell into almost by accident. Maybe there's some skill involved there, but for the most part, it's just been an exceptionally lucky story. That means that what's a big failure in starting up a company perspective? Is a big failure not landing that investment? Is a big failure losing some of your employees? Is a big failure putting down the company? And I think I would argue that not necessarily are any of these failure of starting up a business. It could be you just come to the realization that you've done something wrong and you need to do something else. For us, we have kind of three main failures that we think about when we talk about Endrava Valentine. We talk a lot. One of them, maybe the one I should start with, is playing it too safe. The way Valentine and I were brought up in Dean Miguel, a big technical consultancy, is our value to the clients was going into projects and being able to identify what could possibly go wrong, what are the probabilities that it would go wrong, and what are the consequences. So basically, you build up an internal skill set of identifying everything that could possibly go wrong in a project. Not the best way to start your own company, because when you start thinking about all the things that can go wrong, your list grows pretty quickly. So for us, it's been tough to avoid taking that into account when we started the company and playing it too safe. For us, we should have realized quicker that we should have grown the company. We took 2.5, almost 3 years before we came to the conclusion that we have enough money left aside, we have enough projects, we have enough clients to start taking on people. Time is everything here. So we should have, maybe after year 1.5, we should have started taking on people. And we're trying to challenge ourselves, what is going to make us more eligible or eager to take risk going forwards? And I think we need somebody else to drive us towards that. I don't know how that is for you, CG, how you feel that people can push you to take that risk.
So I'm a risk taker. And so I'm that person, Eric, I do less planning and less playing it safe. I never play it safe. I always play it at some risk level. And that's why I've started 4 companies and I'm now finally managing to live off of it. You know, it took me a long time, and it took me a lot of going back to work and to regular companies, and because I play it even if I don't have the cards, and this is for me it's the opposite actually. I need someone who's more on the planning term. The idea here I think is to balance this risk taking, because not you and me have very different approaches to risk taking, but and manage to be successful, but both of us see the need of having the counterpart in this. So I think for me the conclusion in this is, when I look for partners or when I look for even employees, I look for employees who have that feature that I don't have, because I highly value this opposite of the risk taking, which is the planning and the playing it safe. It's still for me that would be one of my failures. It's not to play it safe enough, and you know, sometimes taking too many risks that put me in a situation where I have to abandon. Where if I had played it safe, I could have lived a little bit longer through it.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. Yeah. Maybe we should, for Endrava's sake, what we could do better, I think, is next time we recruit, we could try to find somebody who is willing to explore more far-fetched and bigger picture ideas more than Valentine are comfortable with, and hoping give them enough, I don't know, credibility or authority in the company to challenge us on where we need to go forwards, to push us. I think that'd be useful. I like that complementary, perspective where people can bounce off each other. Yeah, I think that would be good.
Yes, you mentioned something earlier, Eric, and I was curious to hear more about it. You mentioned that you're starting with consulting, and that you're then taking on projects out of the consulting. And I'm curious to hear if you've ever took a project that was not did not end up working, or that if you ever considered how do you identify the added values that you're creating, and how you can create projects around it, and all of this.
Sure. Most of the projects that we have are external, meaning that we don't have so many internal business development projects in Endrava. Yeah. Most of the projects that we have are from external clients who come to us with some sort of problem that they're needing to solve, and that they're willing to pay money having solved. And I think that's the first litmus test. Are people willing to put money on having their problem solved? If they are, typically a good identifier saying that they have some sort of need that's important to them. Where we're struggled is sometimes in the partnerships that we need to have to take on these projects, because Endrava is a small company. We have a pretty narrow set of skill sets, and that's very much revolved around greenhouse gas emissions. And sometimes the client wants that dimension of greenhouse gas emissions being taken into account in a bigger perspective. Maybe looking at strategy, maybe looking more at the finance of things, and where we need to partner up with other companies to be able to deliver a proposal together. So where we struggled is sometimes trying to identify which partners do we want to go together with in delivering these projects. And one of the projects that we failed on has been where Endrava has come in as a subcontractor. And we feel that to very much extent we've been overrun in the things that we wanted to do in the project. So then we end up with a deliverable that we're not ultimately responsible for, but at the end of the day, we don't want to work with these collaborators ever again, and we don't think the client is particularly happy with what is being delivered. So for us, it's building ideas of that and trying to figure out, okay, what to do next. I think it's about partnerships. And do you want to have some regular people that you work together with, or do you want to have, open-ended collaborations that sometimes you end up going together with some people and sometimes you end up going together with other people? I'm not sure if that answers your question. Were you more on the line of how
that answers my question, and it's also very the point that you make about is the client willing to give you money for something is I think is crucial to many mistakes that people make. It's a mistake that I've made also, assuming that a client sees an added value in something that I offer, because I'm such like probably most ME3s, PM3s, we have social values, and we want the world to hop on this ride. So we sell them our dream, So with Exventus, I sold my dream to people. I didn't sell them the dream they wanted. So people were, I had the impression that people were on the boat because everyone was excited about this idea, but then no one was willing to give me money for it. So so that was a rude failure to see that my dreams, no one wants to fund my dreams. So the idea here is that the learning is that always formulate the dream in terms of the words of the person who is dreaming and not yours. And this would have been a slight difference of understanding that if a client doesn't want to give you money, is that you're not selling something of value.
Yeah. What we struggled with in Andrava starting up was that we had this dream of being able to develop products and services very, very close, very right here. We wanted to be able to get going on these products and services right away and maybe leave that consulting hamster wheel as quickly as we possibly could. And two realizations that came to mind. The first one was that we didn't get very close to these products and services right away. And the second one was that we actually started enjoying the consultancy part more. And now 3.5 years later, I'd say that 95% of all that we do is still consultancy. But every so often, when we get with clients and we start to explore what kind of problems they have, they're able to feed us a lot of cool ideas that could turn into products and services. And it's only now that we've taken one of them, and Valentin has developed this web-based dashboard for locating CO2 sources in Europe. And we're now in dialogue with some of the biggest oil companies in the world who want to buy this software as a service and use it to identify how to develop carbon capture and storage value chains. So then that's example of consulting turning into an idea, turning into a service that we could sell on the side that goes not along the consulting part of the company, but towards something else. Again, that's luck. But it makes me wonder, CG, now when you start new companies, what makes you go through that mental checklist of, do I have what it needs to get this thing started, or what makes you hesitate?
Yes. So this would be it brings me to my last mistake, which was when I first started all my companies. I didn't know myself well enough. I had perceptions of myself that were not true. For example, the one I still had the hope that I would one day be organized, and now I've come to terms with the fact that I won't be. So what I do is I checked, am I starting a new business takes a lot of energy and time. So do I have this energy and time, and with everything else around me, personal and professional. So this is the first checklist. I check with myself because I used to not check with myself. So and then I look this project to come to terms with, what do I need? Do I need do I need someone to develop a product? Yes. Do I have that person? No. So I look for my checklist, the checklist that I know of. And sadly, I only learn by mistake. I don't learn by webinars.
Sometimes learning by doing or learning by not doing, I guess.
So as I go, I keep learning new things, and they come on my checklist, and I check them off. And but the most important one is for me now is to understand my limits, and this is something that I still I'm pursuing right now, is to understand myself fully, so I can understand what are my needs in terms of personal life, career life, and everything else. And then but because I find it quite interesting, the consulting part also brings me a lot of ideas, and I think it's something that is key to understanding starting a business, is that if you don't have, let's say, the idea of the next unicorn idea in consulting, if you have an added value in a company, you probably have an added value as a consultant. So this is an easy step that you can take, and this allows you to actually dig very deep into projects and problems, because people give you money to solve a problem, as you say, and if you get to the root of that problem, then it can always become a bigger added value.
Yeah. I like what you said about trying to learn new things and that being a driver for you, that you're kind of driven by, this is something that I've never done before, let's jump on it. And I think that's true for us as well. We like to take on projects which typically combine things that we've never done before because it makes us better, but also because it's exciting. We don't want to be a commodity consulting company that does the same type of analysis day in and day out. And if we have to do that, then the very least we want to do is try to figure out how much of this process can we automate and how much of this could we make clients understand and learn and do themselves so that next time around, maybe we can take a quality assurance role instead of doing the whole project for them. So that learning new things, that's, I think any kind of company that has that as a culture would do rather well. It makes me also think on one of the big failures that we've had is trying to recruit. It's really, really, really difficult to find good people. And it's weird because there's a lot of good people out there. So we've tried all sorts of different ways of recruiting people through LinkedIn, through Facebook, through people that we know, through the normal job posting ads here in Norway. And ultimately what we found is people are more skeptical to us being a small company than what they would trust in a big company. So there's an establishment of trust that we completely misjudged. In a way, we feel safer being in Andrava because we have control over what it is that we do. So when the company does well, it's our credit. And when the company doesn't do well, it's our fault. And so far, the company's done well, so we feel more in control. And we thought that that would help build trust with the people that we want to take on board. Not so much. The other one is...
I have a question. A question on that HR before you jump on a different topic.
Yeah, go for it.
So I'm going to just pause for a second. So we have 2 minutes to wrap this up, and then we also go to questions because we have several questions from the audience too.
Okay,
cool.
So
all right.
Eric, do you think it's difficult to hire because your standards are above average?
Yeah.
And how do you think you need to do you think you need to lower your standards? Let's say you hire 50 people.
That's a tough question. I like the way you asked that question.
Yes.
Here there's two parts. One thing is trying to hire people with the same type of competency that myself and Valentin as energy engineers. I think then we're pretty well qualified to understand what it would take, and then we are not particularly willing to compromise on who we take on board. The other aspect is the complementary skill sets. The first hire that we had, we looked for an economist or an engineer. We ended up hiring somebody with a PhD in climate psychology. How on earth is an engineer supposed to evaluate whether that doctor in climate psychology had what she needed and what it would take to drive a consultancy together with us? And we didn't feel that we lowered standards. We just felt on thin ice having the tools available to figure if she was good enough. So will we lower standards? No. Do we feel that we have everything that we need in order to evaluate people with different backgrounds than ourselves? No. So it's a gamble every time. We just pray to God that these people don't leave our company. Yeah.
Yes.
Thanks a lot. That was really some very interesting learnings that you both shared. And I think a lot of takeaways for all of us who are budding entrepreneurs and really interested in figuring out, and hopefully we actually take the learnings from the webinar and try to take those when we move ahead. We're now going to go to the question and answers. And then if we still have time left, then Eric, you can come back to the last one that you wanted to share. Our first question today is from IOB Monkey. So that's actually Pauline, one of my classmates. So her question is on how do you keep the motivation going among your partners when you're doing the project as a side hustle? So what about bringing the team together and keeping them motivated?
So this to me resonates a lot with the Women in Tech Manifesto because it was a side project for everyone doing it. We started it, we founded it, we were 7 co-founders, and it was extremely difficult. Motivation was there, but the Women in Tech Manifesto it's a manifesto. You know, it's requesting a change about something that is not equal in the world, and this brings a lot of passion, and also people have a lot of different divergent opinions on this. So what was it motivated us because it was something that we had at the core, but it was difficult to be motivated and to keep not arguing, but having divergent opinions about it. And my takeaways from this is that Eric mentioned it in his last comment. You need to be very selective about the people who you bring onto a project. You cannot just start a project with people because they're your friends. You cannot just start a project with people because they're interested in the idea. Everyone's interested in an idea. Not everyone has the motivation to bring this idea to life. And you cannot surround yourself with people who don't want to do it, else they'll sink your boat. So it's very selfish, the way you have to see it. You have to select people who you know have the capacity to do it. And then motivation, ideally, there's someone who emerges as a leader and who is not a self-imposed leader, but a leader elected from your small group of people. And this would be natural, a little bit like the agile way of thinking and the scrum where your agile leader is selected by the community. And this will make sure that people will look up to that leader, and that leader has that role of keeping the motivation, and if the motivation is not there, do something about it.
Thank you.
Oh, it's a good answer, Claudia. I fully agree with everything that you said. If I could add one thing for us that was important in the beginning, because we were still working at the old company when we started to develop Endrava as a company. And we spent a lot of time in the beginning talking about one thing, and that was alignment. Understanding if Valentin and I were aligned on what is it that we want to do, what's the timeline for what we want to be able to do it for, what are we willing to sacrifice to get there. And then once we had agreed on that and saying, you know what, we have up until summer to jump ship and get this company going, then the alignment was already there, because you want to talk about this motivation and alignment before things get difficult. Things are always going to get difficult, and that's not when you want to have the discussion on alignment. You want to do that when you're good friends and everything's going well. So I think that was what kept our motivation going, because then you're committed to a timeline and you're committed to, by this date, we need to be out. Either you're going to start working for somebody else or you're going to have launched your other company. So which one is it going to be? And then you hustle, you get it going. Yeah.
Thank you to the two of you. The next question is from NE, a question to Claudia. How did you build up something on the previous companies? So based on the 4 different companies that you set up, and how do you use them as stepping stones?
So every company well, they all failed at something. So I always use that failure as not redoing it again. The first company of cooking lessons, it was the partnership. I had a partnership with my sister to start this company. It was a huge mistake. She's a great person. She's not a great partner for founding a company. So never again. The next company I founded alone, which was also a mistake. So because it was a product company. But all this, there are small mistakes, and I don't repeat them again. Also, the other important thing in there is the contacts. I've created myself a network of contacts that has a huge value. When I started this consultancy, I made a few phone calls and I had clients. It was within weeks. It was very, very easy. And this is something we didn't really talk about it in this webinar, but it's, for me right now as a consultant, it's essential to have that network of contacts. It makes my life much easier. So all this work that I've done before didn't end up to nothing, because now I have a pool of people that I can go up to and say they know my value. They have not seen me bring that value to, let's say, the final point or a sustainable point, but they've seen my work, they've seen my personality, and they're willing to give me money to solve some of their problems.
Thank you. We have the next question again from IOB Monkey. How do you come to your pricing proposal to your clients and to yourself, so the salary, and what was considered and how should it be structured? So probably also around the cost and value proposition that you explained, Claudia, in the last failures.
Yeah, I feel Eric would be very good to answer that question.
Well, we cheated, Claudia, because because we came out of being consultants, so we knew what one of the
Yeah.
biggest technical consultancy in Norway was charging for their projects, and we said, you know what, we need to offer at least the same quality of service, and we need to do it cheaper. So we cut our rates by 30%, and we said basically you get the old company name services, but you get it at a 30% discount. But what we're struggling now with is how do you develop those rates and push those rates going forwards, because we don't want to undercut our own rates in the future. And I mean, we have rates now that vary between 100 to 140 euros per hour for hourly rates. The law firm that uses for consultancy services to us often charges 350 or 400 euros per hour. They don't have any longer education than we do. They don't bill any more hours than we do. How come they are at that hourly rate and we're not? So that's something that we consider day in and day out. But it's a culture thing as well. It's not like you can go to your clients and say, one day I'm going to charge you 100 euros, the next day I'm going to charge you 300. So then you have to try to communicate value instead of hourly rates, and that takes time.
Yes.
CG?
Yes, I think for me similar. I looked when I priced myself, I looked at what's done around. Because I don't have the costs of the structure of the building of all of this, the operational cost, I reduced by also roughly 30%. Right now, I'm pricing myself at $125 per hour, which is average for a consultant here. Charging double or triple would mean that I need to ensure the added value that I have. I think I'll soon have an added value that's worth this, but I'll also have to structure myself differently. So, and then this also means bringing new clients as you change your pricing proposal, because your old clients cannot know about this, or they cannot be imposed. So yeah, so and then on the reverse side, I price myself. How much money do I need to survive? Housing is costing me this much, kids is costing me this much, and then. Going out because I don't want to suffer. I need to be happy. How much is my happiness worth? I price it, and this is the minimum I need to make. I convert this into hours. I double it for admin, and that's it.
I thought you said you weren't very structured. But,
so in there, yes, it's just out there. No.
We follow the same approach on salary. What is the minimum that we need to get by in our daily lives? And then the rest stays in the company.
Yeah.
Thank you. Next question is is there something from NA? Is there something as too much risk? And is it sensibly measurable?
For me, the litmus test, I can jump on this very quickly. For me, too much risk is when you're losing sleep at night. Entrepreneurship is not supposed to be something where you regularly feel so insecure about what you're doing that it affects your quality of life. And for me, the good gauge of that is sleep. If you can sleep through the night, that's a good start. If you're not, you are taking too much risk. Does it happen that I have sleepless nights? Yes. Maybe once, twice, 3 times a year. Anything more than that, something is off. But people have different tolerance to risk. I think CG would be much happier and sleep much better than me. So with more risk. So it's an individual thing. You have to calibrate according to that.
Yeah, I fully agree. I really like your measuring your KPI for this, Rambo. For me, it's rare that I have a sleepless night, even if if I take risks, just because risk affects me differently. But it's perfectly said. In fact, define what is your minimum quality of life in terms of risk. What it does to you is it creates stress. So let's say sleepless night is an effect of being stressed. Me, I sleep, but maybe I have different manifestation of stress. Like, for example, being impatient or not being a pleasant person around my kids. And for me, this is my metric. Am I pleasant around my kids? Yes. Then it means that I'm, my risk and my involvement in this risk is at a good level. So linking it to the manifestation of your stress is perfect. I love it, Rambo.
Thank you for that. Next question is from Astul, the founder of Emanate. How important it is to have original idea in starting a project, company, or is that actually not an important, or is it actually an important factor at all? That's a tough one.
I don't think the originality in itself is what counts so much. You're going to find lots of examples of businesses where there are lots of actors who offer almost the same thing for almost the same cost. So just go to the supermarket and look at how many different cereal boxes you can get. So the originality of the idea, I don't think that's so much it. I think it's more in the execution, what kind of approach and style that you take to solving the problems for your clients. And if you can set yourself apart by that, I think that has something more to do with it than just the idea.
Yes.
Don't try to reinvent the wheel, just try to do it better than people have done it before.
And it's something that I've personally felt a lot, wanting to have something unique or something different or something, seeing the added value in the differenceness or the originality. But it led me to defining projects that my clients didn't want to have. So for me, the originality right now, or the way I see having an original project, is just a project that particularly listens to the needs of the clients. This is very original. Not a whole lot of people do it.
Yeah.
So that originality is the type of originality that's you can start a coffee shop, a cafe, and this is not original at all. But if people around your neighborhood all have kids, and they never have a pleasant experience at the cafe because the kids are always, they have no space, and waiters are always scared of hitting them, and then they give you the eye of the kid who's running around. You don't feel comfortable. But if that cafe creates a play zone outside the path of the waiters, with a lot of toys and activities that the parents can have a pleasant time at the cafe, the kids too, and the waiters too. Now this is listening to the needs. It's original. It's the same cafe, but people are going to come and buy your stuff.
CG, are you telling me that you're starting a coffee shop sometime soon?
Oh, never. The only food thing I would consider doing is pizza.
I'll be there.
I have a passion for pizza. I built myself a wood oven. I'm taking that learning curve seriously.
Just because you mentioned that it has to cater to the client needs, does that mean that you try to identify the problem first or the client first before you go ahead with the idea, or is it the idea that came first in your cases?
They all come together for me. They're linked. They're so linked together. The idea has to come with a client, because if there's no client, there's no business model.
Yeah, we end up, even though we could land a project and sign a contract, we still find that we spend about 20-30% of the project as a whole understanding what the client need actually is. And typically what it says in the proposal is typically not what we end up trying to solve for the client.
Yeah. That's the other thing. Don't believe what they tell you.
Exactly. And exploring that together, you're going to get a lot of interesting ideas. Oh, you said it was like this, but in fact, it's not like this at all. Yeah. And so I fully agree with Claudia. You have to explore that together with the client.
Okay, thank you. Next, we have a question from Siddharth. Could you name some renewable energy environment topics where companies are looking for services from consultancy startups? So have you identified some needs that are open out there?
Oh, I can tell about one example that we do a lot these days is helping companies from various different sectors mapping out their greenhouse gas emission footprint. So that means going along the value chain of that company all the way from all their suppliers and distributors, figuring out what it is that they manufacture or produce or make, and then how that is delivered to their clients. So that could be anything from one company that distributes and makes magazines about traveling around in Norway. It could be a sports technology manufacturer that makes technical bags for snowboarding and biking and downhill skiing and stuff like that, and understanding how they produce their bags in Vietnam and how they ship them all across the world and what kind of footprint that would be. And we've been looking for tools standardized out there to try to figure out what are the emissions from all these different steps in the value chain, and not very much readily available. So I think that is a definite need out there. people don't understand what their own footprint is for companies. That's also for individuals, but I think companies are most willing to pay for it for now. That's a big need. Yeah.
Thank you.
I had a small addition to this. It's when I tried to sell the recycling the wind turbine blade to the wind companies, I faced an important realization is that renewable companies who are already producing good or sustainability are not necessarily looking to buy sustainability. They're looking to buy more efficiency. This or of cost to service. They want to reduce their cost because anything in the sustainability sector typically suffers from having higher costs and lower. It's rare that it's a difficult industry, the renewable and sustainability, financial.
So process efficiency and figuring out ways to cut down costs.
Sell them ways to cut down costs, and that they'll buy it.
Yeah, I fully agree with that. I wanted to add on a little bit of a thing from the last part of Siddharth's question, and that's from services from consultancy startups. Most companies that we deal with don't really care whether we're a startup or not. They care that we're good at what it is that we do. And as a startup, you're facing an uphill battle because you don't really have a long track record in delivering projects. Very few companies would deliberately go after a startup to have their needs solved for them. They're just looking for the best people for the job. Whether or not you're a startup or not doesn't really matter to them. That's our experience.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Thank you. There's another question from Siddharth, and that's directed to Eric. Do you need some technical software for your consultancy studies? And is the licensing fee a large part of your costs?
It's a good question. This is not a very sexy answer, I think. A lot of what we do right now is in Excel. Yeah, that's how bad it is. We have not fully got into big LCA software. We think that's too detailed for most people, and we don't really want to go into the details of this. So I know some other consultancy companies have that as a big part of their costs. So for us, licensing fees for Office 365 is a couple of $100 per person in the company per year. So no, not a big technical software need so far. Hope somebody would make some tools. Maybe it is that we have to create them ourselves at some point.
Or maybe someone listening to us today has ideas on how to create a tool and support you there.
Yeah, it could be. Yeah. Do you spend a lot of money on software, CG?
No, and in fact, same answer here. I created for creating financial proposals. I've created an Excel tool that with small programming that automates a bunch of my operations, and I can generate a subsidy plan out of a financial plan in seconds. I'm also thinking about putting this into software because I've created my own tool in the end.
Yeah. We also do quite a bit in Power BI and ArcGIS and Python. Python is free. Power BI is not very expensive. That's like Excel on steroids for Microsoft. And ArcGIS, we use QGIS, which is the free version of it. So software, not a big thing in our company.
Thank you. Another question from Annie. Do you face frustration or disappointment at times in face of failures? As entrepreneurs, how do you work through it towards another idea, projects, or clients?
Yeah, so absolutely, but it's like anything in life. It becomes more bearable the more you do it. So I sometimes practice myself for things that I know are going to be painful outside my business life. So just to getting used to people saying no to you. It's something that can be defined as a failure, because when people say no, you ask something and they said no. So just go out there and practice yourself asking for things, and that most likely people won't want to give to you, and they'll tell you no, and then you'll experience the feeling and you'll get over it quicker and quicker. The idea here is to be able to dissociate yourself from the answer from your business. And this is difficult.
It is.
Yeah. I think for us in Drava, sorry, CG, go ahead. I was thinking that failure is part of doing business, you know? And it means you're gonna have disappointment. If you didn't have any disappointments, I don't think it'd be fun to drive a business, because the rewards of doing something well, you wouldn't acknowledge it as a success. But there's a way of separating failure from what it is that we can learn from it and not do it again the next time. So if you take that frustration and disappointment and channel that energy into ensuring that next time around, we're not going to make the same mistake again. I think that's been a good way of dealing with frustration. And shit's going to happen. It happens all the time.
Yeah, and sometimes this frustration can delay you a lot into getting things done, because it can create stress. It can create sleepless nights. It can also create denial. So it's actually a very important thing to deal with at the beginning.
Yeah. And there's that satisfaction of the feedback loop. Once you've identified something that's gone wrong, you put in some measures to make sure that it doesn't happen again, and you see that your measures are working and that you solved that problem and you moved on. That feeling is priceless. And what we tell our people now when we hire them is that we're looking for people who care about the environment and think that greenhouse gas emissions is an important part of that. But ultimately, what we're looking for is people who come in the door at 8 o'clock in the morning. You come here to solve problems. That's what is going to make us better as a company, is you come in here with a mindset that there's something that needs to be solved and I'm going to figure out how to do it. And if we can find people who have that mindset, we've made good progress in building Endava forwards.
Thank you, guys. We now have another last two more questions. Sorry, I'm sorry that it's running a bit late, but the questions are so interesting. So I would be happy to go ahead. But is it okay for you guys to take 10 more minutes and answer these two questions and then close?
Yes,
absolutely. No problem at all. Yeah.
So the next question is from IOB Monkey on how do you prove that you're better than the big companies if you haven't done any work for them yet, nor have much portfolio? So if you are a startup, how do you prove yourself and how do you get and land those big contracts?
I have an idea on that, but go ahead.
Yeah, go.
No, go for it.
Okay. So for me, it's there's always someone out there who's willing to give you a chance. You have to find that person. Else you keep working at a salary and as an employee, and you'll eventually build a portfolio. You can build side projects that are not for profit. Involve yourself in projects where you don't get paid but get things done and can build your portfolio. But for me, what was big key in building my credibility was people giving me a chance. And you just have to go through a lot of no's before you, unless you're very lucky, but you have to go through a lot of people saying no to you, and then eventually you find someone who gives you a chance. You find that person and you take to the last penny of what that person is willing to give you. That's how you do it.
Cool. That makes a lot of sense. I like that approach. I think for us, what we've done is when we try to land clients that we've never had before, we oversell. And that means that the proposal that we deliver to that client needs to be twice as good as any other proposal that they're going to get. And it's not because we're so much cheaper. We're not so much cheaper anymore. But it is because when we deliver that proposal, half the solution of the project is already in the proposal. So we spend a lot of time writing that proposal, because ultimately that client wants to know, do you have what it takes to solve that problem for them? And if you can convince them of that already in your proposal, that is your ticket to beating out the other companies. So we have several projects now where we end up beating our old employer in competitions, public tendering processes. And that's not because we're cheaper, it's because we're better.
So that's how you found the person. You find the person who's willing to give you a chance is by giving you hire Rambeck to do your proposal.
You practice, and then you end up writing a lot of proposals that you don't get, and you try to learn from why on earth they would not get this job. Yeah. What's good with public tendering processes, at least in Norway, is that you get to ask for the evaluation after the tendering process. So you can see how you stack up against all the other people who delivered tenders, and you can figure out how they evaluated different parts of the proposal. And that's when you figure out if you're too expensive or too cheap, if you have delivered too much or too little, and where you fall through. And then you do it differently next time, and then you win.
That's also an added risk as a company, that if you put so much time and effort into the proposal, which might not come at the end, that's also an added risk that you then willingly take to get these clients, right?
Yeah, but when you're small, you really, really, really want it. When you're a big consultancy, they don't want it in the same way because they have so many other opportunities that they want to jump on. And I think that sets you apart as a small consultancy. You can communicate to them that you really want this and you really know what it is that you're going to do to get the job done for them. That's different. Yeah.
Thank you. The last question to Eric from Adwait. Is it sometimes too difficult to have two leads in your company? I think also applicable to Claudia in all the previous companies where you have had multiple founders.
Oh yeah, that's that compatibility between founders. I've been super privileged to have somebody like Valentin on board in Andrava. There's nobody else in the world that I would have wanted to do this with than him. He's twice as smart as me. He's much more humble, and he's a comfortable guy to be around. I think that we complement each other. I think we also spend a lot of time talking together outside of regular company problems, like project-specific problems. We're talking about how we feel about Andrava, where it is that we wanted to go. And we have a very open dialogue together about when we disagree. And it's not about person, it's about talking about what we disagree with in the projects that we're doing and the way that we run the company. So is it difficult? It's difficult if you don't give it enough time, I think. If you take for granted that things are always going to be well between the founders, then it's going to get difficult. But with Valentin, I think it's been a very, very smooth ride. And although we've had very heated disagreements about where to take the company and what to do, we never become personal enemies or fought over personal things. So we're kind of able to separate people from the problem. I don't know if that was something that more people studied back in the days in ME3 and PX3, but this is not about the people. It's not about Valentin as a person. It's about what's best for Andrava. If you can get to that discussion and trust the other one to have that in interest, then I think it's gone pretty well. So I would recommend having somebody else. Yeah.
Thank you. Claudia, do you want to add to that?
I mostly agree with all what Eric said. I would say there's a balance. It's always difficult to have someone else because it's not exclusively you who's in control, but the benefit of being two should be always much higher. So if you're not able to see that in the balance that it's higher, it's either that the person you picked is not the good one, or that you lack the capacity and the skills to have a person, and that you should work on these capacities within yourself. So, or maybe a mix of the two to end up seeing the balance going towards the side of being better when being two. And then yes, you need to find it's like finding a partner for a business is like finding a partner in life.
Yeah.
It's difficult.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for that. I think that was all the questions that we had today. Before we close, is there any last remarks that you guys want to share that you missed out on before, and something that didn't come up in the questions but you think is important for us to take away with us today?
I have one thing that I've been thinking about for a long time. The reason why I went into entrepreneurship was because I was inspired by some of my classmates in ME3 who started a company already when we were in Stockholm in 2011, beginning of 2012, as part of their master's thesis. And I thought that these people who are in PM3 and in ME3, there's something about the skill set that they've built by traveling around to all these different places and being adaptable and open to new experiences and quick on their feet and agile. And I've just tried to understand why not more of us are jumping on the entrepreneurship bandwagon. It's fun. It's super rewarding. It's a bit scary at times. But I think it's the type of people, if it's not us, then who is it going to be? So that's a reflection that I have. I don't have the answer. I'd be very curious to learn more about what keeps people from jumping on this. I don't have the answer, but it's a reflection. Yeah.
I think some of the points that you mentioned today might help us jump on the wagon for sure, because you did tackle many of these challenges which we do face, or most of us do think about before taking that big step forward.
Yes, well, it brings me one thing we didn't talk about in within this thing, and that brings us a little bit to this webinar also, is that it's for me, it was always important to surround myself with people more experienced than me in entrepreneurship, or the technical aspect. But one key thing was to surround me with a network of people, a ground base that would always be there, and they would understand my failures and they would help me get through them, not see them as such a big deal, because they had gone through them and they were where they were and they had survived. So that network of support, of mentors, is a great asset into starting this, and start bouncing ideas, challenging your ideas, and giving you like a family type of feeling of support.
So having that support network, definitely.
Mm-hmm.
Something that, of course, probably we cannot solve that in the call today, but one of the audiences shared is the visa issue. So a lot of the ME3, PM3 graduates also do travel to Europe from foreign countries. And the visa is a big challenge. So to be able to continue living in Europe and wanting to survive there, setting up a company, it's not so easy to get a visa that supports you in doing that. I'm aware that Netherlands offers something like this for the ME3 graduates, but it is quite a difficult process to apply still. So that is definitely an important concern. Claudia, was this a concern for you? Because you are not from Europe, right? So.
Yes, but I didn't start my business in Europe. So I started all my businesses in Canada.
Okay.
And I would say you can always start projects that are not businesses. This is one possibility. It gives you also or you can find a partner who has a visa, and you define in your contract what's the deal. So this could be an interesting checklist on the partnership visa, eligible to work.
Or maybe you could explore, I like that idea, and also maybe you could explore with the company that you're currently employed for and say, you know what, I want to spend 2 days a week developing my own projects and ideas. Can I work part-time with you? Then you use the part-time work for develop or managing a visa, provided that they let you stay for part-time. I guess that varies a little bit between countries. But then you have other 2 days a week where you could start developing that project more sincerely and try to find some partners to get it done. But I also went to my home market, and I think CG, that must have been a big factor for you as well, to be on home turf, where you start knowing people and you have that network. It's very difficult to try to develop an idea in a market that you don't really know, where you're not super comfortable with the local language, where you don't have the local connections, because this all of this has to work together in an ecosystem. So to those of you who are on visas in Europe now and try to figure out, I want to jump on my idea, kudos to you. You're hardcore. I like it. I think it's possible, but I don't think you've chosen the easiest path to set up a company. The easiest way is probably in your home market.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for that. Definitely an important and difficult discussion, actually, on whether or on which country to choose and which market to choose. But thank you so much for the 1 hour, 20 minutes. It took a bit longer, but really eye-opening discussion. As Ema pointed out, we learned so much in the last hour. It was really useful and meaningful. To all the audience out there, Eric and Claudia both are happy to interact with you all. So please feel free to connect with them on LinkedIn. If you have further questions, ask them. Also, if you want to listen to further webinars from Emanate, subscribe to the Emanate channel on LinkedIn or on YouTube, and to keep joining us on webinars. If you have ideas for new webinars, feel free to write to us. Thanks again, Claudia and Eric, for taking time out today. It was extremely helpful. So thank you once again.
Thanks for the invitation. It was fun to be here.
Thanks very much, Nikita, and us too as well, and everybody else who's helped organize. It's super cool, and I always love talking to Claudia about these things. So it's we don't get to do it very often, so it's been good on many levels for me. It's amazing. Thank you very much.
Same here.
Thank you so much, everyone. Then bye-bye.
Bye.
See ya.